On this edition of Bay Area Bountiful, we present a student environmental film festival. First, we learn about the crisis of plastic in the world's oceans. Then we explore how increasing regulation and illegal marijuana growing are putting a strain on legal growers. Finally, we look at coyotes in San Francisco, and then how long wait times at southern border crossings are having adverse health effects on those awaiting entry. It's all coming up next on Bay Area Bountiful.
Bay Area Bountiful is made possible in part by Rocky the free-range chicken and Rosie the original organic chicken. The Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District, Made Local Magazine, and Sonoma County Go Local, and through the generous support of Sonoma Water. Cultivate, celebrate, connect.
Julian Jordan presents a jarring short film that expresses the problems, causes, and effects of plastic pollution in our oceans. We explore the complex issues behind ocean pollution through the views of both young people and scientists. This film offers the unique perspective of current-day teens who will soon inherit this massive problem.
The ocean is definitely this mystic thing that you can't really describe it, but you can feel it. And you need to spend time there to see like how it moves, how everything works in there, because every day it will be different. Every hour it will be different. It's a living thing. So to really feel it, you gotta be present and you gotta be there.
We are so lucky we have this planet and it has life on it, which is absolutely amazing, and call it divine will, call it the product of incredible probability, whatever it is. We have a planet, again, with life on it, which is super unique because we haven't found another planet about which we can say the same.
Here they are in our homes, augmenting our comforts, serving our needs. Plastic, plastic, plastic. With new uses, there arise new wants. New wants mean new markets, new prosperity, your new frontier.
The future of plastics is bright indeed.
At least 8 million metric tons of plastics leak into the sea every year, which is the equivalent to dumping contents of one rubbish truck into the ocean every minute.
New report says plastic will outweigh fish in the oceans by 2050.
Waste plastic, which all too often ends up in the ocean.
Researchers say the Arctic Ocean has become the last stop for plastic waste dumped into the seas, and trash is now piling up in the once pristine waters.
500 sea lions dead, possibly after eating tons of plastic.
I see plastic pollution everywhere. It's one of those things that you don't notice until someone points it out to you, and then you can't stop seeing it. It's every corner, every piece of plastic someone throws away, every packaged food item that you know is going to be thrown away after one use. It's every beach, it's every sidewalk, it's every street, it's every garbage can, it's everything.
Looking at the rate that humanity is manufacturing and producing and consuming plastic, this non-biodegradable, everlasting garbage, it's obviously insane, and it's increasing. And the question is, how are we going to turn this ship and change our behavior on a collective level?
So any of those single-use plastics that you use once and then dispose of can end up in the marine environment and then harm ocean life.
We're finding more and more that as plastics break down, they never really get recycled, but they break down into smaller and smaller bits, and those very small plastic bits enter our environment and can be ingested by us through our water supply or our food.
It can bioaccumulate up the food web, so when a small fish eats a tiny piece of plastic and a bigger fish then eats that small fish, they're going to accumulate those plastics within their bodies.
In addition, if animals ingest this plastic, it can completely impact their stomach, making them unable to eat, and then they slowly starve to death, which is a pretty miserable way to go. Sometimes we have whales washing up on beaches dead, and we don't know until we get into the necropsy, into the animal autopsy, and open up the stomach, and then sometimes we find very large amounts of plastic. Sometimes those pieces of plastic are small enough to actually go into the intestines, and if that happens, and it becomes very infected, and then that usually leads to death. Unfortunately, we see about 10% of our animals here at the Marine Mammal Center impacted by plastic. One case that comes to mind in particular is a California sea lion that we named Thin Mint, and we could see that Thin Mint had a very thin layer of monofilament around his neck, and it was cutting so deeply and had been there for so long that his skin was actually growing over it. It was a very thin line, but it's so incredibly strong that every time he would move, it would just cut deeper and deeper, and because he wasn't fully grown, he was still growing into it.
If there's one thing that I could say that I brought away from my experience being with the birds on Midway Island, it's something that really changed the way I see everything. And I discovered in the process of being with albatrosses, seeing them die as their bodies are filled with plastic, I discovered that I loved them. It's like my love for them was revealed rather than created. One of the things that was so difficult to bear about being on this incredibly remote island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean was that every time we opened up a dead albatross, we found plastic inside of it. And in that way, it was so much of a reflection of us.
Maybe some of my trash has ended up in the ocean, and so I feel sad, but you know, this is the reality that we have to face. It comes from all of us, and it impacts all of us. We don't act when people tell us to. We act when we're inspired, when we feel something, when we feel angry, or when we feel frightened about our future, or when we get sad enough about what's being lost in our world. Then we act. All over the world, there's all kinds of really interesting change being made around the way we consume plastic. And some of the most effective activism is going on in legislatures and governments who are now banning single-use disposable plastics.
On average, Americans use 500 million straws per day. So if we can skip the straw, even just one straw throughout your day, it's gonna have a great impact. Additionally, if people are willing to take that next step, other than reducing their single-use plastics. If they want to take that next step, then they should really work in their communities to take action. So things like participating in beach cleanups or voting for legislation that actually creates change in infrastructure. So an example of that would be banning the bag, which we accomplished in California, which is amazing. And who knows, in the future, if we keep talking about this and having these conversations, then maybe we'll ban the straw, ban the bead, other plastics that can end up in the environment.
The problem of ocean plastic pollution, the very beginning of the problem is in our mind. It's in our consciousness, in our culture. And that's really, to me, where there's the most transformational juice right now in terms of activism, is simply to shift the way we think and feel about things like plastic. And on a collective level, if we can achieve that, then everything changes.
I started out, as a youth involved with this, at least passionate about it, and I thought people would listen to me. And so I realized that, especially at schools, starting through schools and getting into the larger community, there is a big interest in youth voice, and we matter. And so gotta acknowledge that, gotta acknowledge your power. It's never too late to start, and if we face it together, we can overcome it.
We can bring to light for everybody how serious this issue is, because it's no longer just adults talking about it, it's also the youth of the country.
So as young people, we're in a difficult position because we've kind of inherited this mess that we did not create, but our futures and that of our posterity is completely dependent on our ability to undo the damage that generations before us have done.
That's what I think youth and activists and youth in general across the nation have a responsibility to do, is recognize that it's not just the adults that have a responsibility to kind of rectify this problem, but that when this problem is really going on and going down, and when we're feeling the effects, it's actually us youth that will decide whether or not these effects will continue or get worse.
I don't want the legacy of the human race to be a group that just took something so amazing and destroyed it instead of protecting it and appreciating it. When you look at billions of years from now, nothing that we do in our lives really will matter, but if we have taken one of the few planets potentially in the entire universe that have life and destroyed it, that's not the legacy I want us to have left.
Pedro Cota and Kristen Huang explore the dark side of some marijuana cultivation. Illegal growers are diverting water and using banned pesticides, leading to the environmental destruction of our land and waterways. As regulation squeezes legal farmers, illegal growers are increasingly polluting our wild spaces with impunity.
We're both second-generation cultivators here on this land. This will be our 19th season.
Chia Rodriguez and Jamie Beatty grow cannabis in Mendocino County. They live and work on a 56-acre ranch.
You're a farmer just like anybody else. You're working long days. You're getting up before dawn. You're, grabbing a quick bite at lunch, and then you're out until dusk.
But unlike established agriculture, a host of new regulations is causing growing pains for this recently legalized industry. State agencies are stepping up environmental regulations to protect watersheds and habitats.
Cannabis cultivation is not as green as the industry is portraying it.
Murad Gabriel is a director of the Integral Ecology Research Center in Humboldt County. His group was one of the first to look at the dark side of marijuana cultivations.
There is a strong subsection of them that do poach significant water. They do impede water courses. They also poach wildlife, and they use restricted or banned pesticides.
Most of that activity comes from illegal growers. But Gabriel said new evidence shows even licensed growing causes habitat destruction. Earlier this year, the California Water Boards fined a grower $150,000 for water violations that impacted salmon habitats. Despite these high-profile violations, Chia says most licensed growers are trying their best to set a good example.
I think we often get lumped into this giant pool of cannabis cultivators are notorious for polluting the environment, wrecking the land, bulldozing the land, cutting down all these trees, and that's totally not what we're all about.
She and Jamie have a permit to collect rainwater. They've spent 2 years bringing their farm up to code.
We're roughly right here. It's one of our ponds and our lower pond there, and our cultivation site 1 and cultivation site 2.
But the scale of cultivation still worries environmentalists. In less than a year, the number of grow licenses exploded, increasing 6 times. And legalizing the industry hasn't reduced illegal farming.
There was no difference between 2018 from 2017.
Still, Chia and Jamie say the state's regulatory burden could drive legal growers out of business.
Come on, I've spent my life savings trying to get compliant here.
Meanwhile, illegal growers will still be out there.
Max Brimlow and Miki Katoni track coyotes traveling in the Bernal Hill area and elsewhere in San Francisco. They also follow Jonathan Young, a wildlife ecologist with the Presidio Trust. Young is documenting the 15-year history of coyotes appearing within the city limits. Suburban areas have grown accustomed to these animals, but urban areas are now learning that these wily coyotes can find a home in a variety of environments.
It's early morning in the Presidio, and Jonathan Young is looking for coyotes.
And you can listen to the volume and intensity of the ping, and it kind of guides us where it's coming from.
Young is tracking them for Presidio Trust, a government agency hoping to learn more about their behavior.
Coyotes in San Francisco is an incredibly politically sensitive topic. They're here to stay, and there's real and perceived conflict between coyotes and people and dogs, and my job is to reduce those conflicts.
The first coyotes were spotted here in the early 2000s. Genetic data suggests some may have come across the Golden Gate Bridge. But they don't just live in the Presidio. An estimated 50 to 100 coyotes live all across the city, from Coit Tower to Bernal Heights.
As far as we know, all the parks that can support coyotes in San Francisco are currently supporting coyotes. Spatially, they're not really restricted as far as moving through these urban areas. You know, they're using the sidewalks and streets.
Young tracks the animals through GPS collars. He hopes his research will help clear up misconceptions about the coyote population in San Francisco.
Urban people have never even seen a coyote. And then they see one, and they think it's a vicious rabid wolf trying to hunt them and kill them.
Statistics show that urban coyotes aren't a threat to humans. So what's the problem? Is it the coyotes themselves, or is it the people who interact with them? San Francisco Animal Care and Control often receives complaints about coyotes, but there have been no recorded instances of bites or rabies here.
I don't think the coyotes themselves are a problem. They're just being coyotes. We as people have to adjust to them, and we have to respond differently.
In some parks, like Bernal Heights, coyotes have become a familiar sight. Problems arise when people feed coyotes or let their dogs off leash around them. Donahue believes if humans are better informed, they can peacefully coexist with coyotes.
The next step for coyotes here is continuing public education. We can all live quite safely together if humans take some common sense precautions.
It appears coyotes are here to stay, if we'll have them.
Well, these animals aren't going anywhere, so we need to better manage the situation. And really what it boils down to is managing people more than managing coyotes.
This is Max Brimlow, reporting from San Francisco.
Student reporter Pedro Cota has uncovered a fascinating story at the intersection of immigration and environmental health. Long lines of cars and trucks queue up awaiting permission to pass through the busy Tijuana-San Diego border crossing. The significant number of carbon-emitting vehicles is having serious adverse health effects on adjacent communities and people waiting to cross the border.
This is the busiest border crossing in the world. Between Tijuana and San Diego, over 100,000 people, cars, and trucks cross every day. There are 2 ports of entry between both cities, and they're both a mess.
Es una vergüenza, con mayúscula, esta frontera que tenemos.
Getting across can take 2 or more hours. The lines of vehicles stretch for miles. But there's something hiding in plain sight at the border. Air pollution. All these idling vehicles are spewing toxic particles into the air for hours on end.
Cruzaba la frontera a pie. Un camión turista se puso al lado mío y entonces yo pensé, todas estas personas que estamos aquí estamos respirando todo lo que ese camión está emitiendo a la atmósfera, ¿verdad? Entonces, ¿qué nos puede pasar?
Carolina Aguilar is a chemist in Tijuana. In 2016, she used a monitor similar to this one to find out how bad the air really was at the border.
Consistió en muestrar partículas que se encuentran en el aire. Se analizó también metales que se encuentran en la atmósfera. Esos metales provienen del escape, son del desgaste de los neumáticos o las llantas, el desgaste de los frenos.
After a year of collecting data, the monitor showed levels of metals and particulate matter that are dangerous for people. Her study found that the average daily emissions at the border don't exceed the exposure limit. But when she looked at the yearly levels, they did exceed the limit by 25%.
Una persona que cruza a diario o ocasionalmente no se ve afectada como una persona que trabaja, en este caso los vendedores ambulantes, personas que tienen sus locales ahí, la migra o la aduana, que ellos sí están, tienen, bueno, que a la larga pueden generar problemas de salud.
That includes Alejandro Gómez Meléndez, who's been working at both border crossings since 1983.
La calidad del aire del smog de los carros es el que sí siento que sí como que te siento un poco más mal, pero son ratos, yo me voy. Se sofoca uno tantito y así como un malestar poquito como de edad cuando ando uno mal del estómago poquito.
According to a San Diego State public health professor, being exposed to high traffic areas like the border crossing has adverse health effects.
Lung diseases, like you might expect, increase in asthma, increase in chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, but also effects on the heart and cardiovascular system, so that you have an increased risk of heart attacks and stroke.
In one of her studies, Dr. Quintana looked at people who drive across the border every day by placing air monitors in their vehicles.
We found an increased level of certain pollutants inside their vehicles during the idling period. That idling wait period contributed about 2/3 of their total pollution for that commute.
For Quintana, limiting exposure is key.
One obvious solution is to reduce that border wait time.
An expansion project at one port of entry promised to do just that by adding more lanes and processing booths. But it hasn't worked out that way. Half of the processing booths aren't staffed most of the time. And the Trump administration's focus on staffing detention centers has meant transferring staff away from ports of entry. Many commercial vehicles have waited up to 8 hours to cross the border. And all their emissions fill the air near communities on both sides of the border.
Every time these border wait times are going to increase, we know that the community is going to suffer. Close to the freeway.
Community organizer David Flores worries about the effects on San Isidro residents, like those who attend these schools on the U.S. side.
There's nothing blocking the flow of all those vehicles idling into the playground area of some of those schools because they're right adjacent to it. And so it's not even a block wall or anything, it's just chain link. Those are the major concerns that we have because children's lungs are still developing at that age and can have serious health effects for the future. We were able to document that if border wait times go beyond 90 minutes, that there's an exponential increase in air pollution to the adjacent neighborhoods.
Flores has used air quality data to push government agencies to make a change.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection said our goal is to reach 30-minute border crossing wait times.
Flores just wants them to keep their word.
We want that to be an achievable goal, not just lip service or not just, something that was stated.
In the meantime, for all those crossing, living, and working around these ports of entries, the toll on their health will continue to mount. Reporting from the U.S.-Mexico border, this is Pedro Cota.
Student filmmakers provide us with fresh, new perspectives on the environmental issues that affect our world. These young reporters and storytellers will shape the future of how the public interacts with new information about the dire consequences our world is facing. The question they are asking us today is, what are we going to do about it? As they stand ready to take the lead in fighting climate change, what legacy will we leave for them so that they don't inherit a broken and damaged planet? Together, all generations can contribute to keeping the Bay Area bountiful.